Good morning and welcome to our series in Conversations with Partners. Today is sponsored by Micro Focus in their channel development and their belief in South Africa. And they've got a select number of partners that they are developing through their SMME program. And we are honored and gratified to have Boas from BoaTech today, the founder and very involved person in the company, one of the fastest growing channel partners from a Micro Focus perspective. And today, Boas is going to kick off a 6-series podcast. That's quite a mouthful for you, man. That is pretty cool. 6 series in the benefits and building a secure security strategy. So we're going to get to know Boas quite well. And I'm going to start off by saying, Boas, soccer or rugby?
I'll go with soccer, and rugby will be the second one.
And your favorite team?
From the soccer point of view, Arsenal and Orlando Pirates in South Africa.
Okay, we are off. This podcast is over. I cannot work with someone who doesn't like Kaizer Chiefs and Liverpool. So we're going to find areas to disagree, but that's the heart of debate. Boas, you've been in business for a number of years now. How did you get there? What gave you the gap to get into IT? Why didn't you get into manufacturing or into accounting?
I think I'll start off from the love of maths and science from school and going to university and studying computer science. That really propelled me to go and have interest in IT. And from there, working for IT companies, from local companies to multinationals, and ultimately going on my own, founding the business and to where it is today.
It must have been quite a big step there. Did your mom ever say to you, no, stick with the big multinational, you've got a job, work that job?
Yeah, every parent will always have that kind of view for their kids. But, I was quite determined to go that route. I felt like it was my calling to take that kind of route. I think the enthusiasm and the drive was always pushing me to say, look, you can't be in this space. This is where you are destined to be.
Did your parents understand that?
Absolutely. I think, it was a bit of a struggle, but we came to terms. I think we had to agree. This was also pushed and emanating from my background, where my father was running a couple of spaza shops and selling fruit and veggies. So that was the drive, because I grew up in that kind of entrepreneurial family.
Oh, that's awesome. Today's Security One episode is know what you don't know. You can't have data privacy without security. And it's quite a hectic topic. I want to understand, how do you take a customer like your father who has a spaza shop, who's an entrepreneur, and educate them around security? What are the first steps that you would suggest?
I think for a person who doesn't have an idea of what security is all about, I'll take them through a step from a physical security, that if you staying in an environment or living in a suburb where security is a concern, you are, vulnerable from any attack. And that can keep you scared and threatened every day. So that becomes a starting point, really. And technology becomes the next step of, starting to explain how technology works and how attacks start in a technology realm, in a technology background and environment.
So cybercrime is a crime. If we picture our house with no walls and no security fences in South Africa, that's what our IT environment is like, unless you've got some sort of cyber protection around that. That's a great analogy. And you find that they can then picture it and they can feel, touch, see what's going on with it. When we go about understanding what data an organization then collects and holds and where is it, what the purpose is around that data, do you find that people are collecting data just because they collect data, or do most people have an understanding of the purpose of their data?
I think, in recent times, the understanding has become a norm, but in early days, data was just being collected, because data can be collected in any form, cell phone, music. Back in the days, you'd watch a concert or go to a concert, not realizing that that was data collection, and not knowing the purpose and just keeping that video or footage from a security camera of a physical building. You'd collect that data not knowing that what you'll do with it and how you'll store it in a long term. But these days, it's all about understanding how that data can be collected and safeguarded in a short or long term. Having an understanding of how that data can be retained, given the policy of an organization or anyone that wants to keep that data for a set amount of time.
So you must see people being surprised when you're pointing out all of their sources of data and where they're collecting data. It reminds me of my father-in-law doing an exercise on his swimming pool and working out how many times he had a swim in the year. And it worked out to about 550 Rand a swim because it was so infrequently. And when we look at these piles of data, I wonder how much it costs for someone to go and retrieve data for a purpose, and if people do those cost calcs. So these sources of structured and unstructured data, like you were saying, CCTV footage, and are there tools out there that you can recommend that help to put some sense into this chaos?
Absolutely. I think, with our partners in Macro Focus, there are a whole lot of tools and solutions that are becoming quite prevalent, and we're recommending to our customers around data collection, around data safeguarding, around data retrieving, if they want to use that data. And you asked about the cost. There is a cost associated with that, but the method of doing it is what determines how much it will cost the customer or anyone who wants to retrieve that data, hence different solutions in the market.
Okay.
So definitely that can be recommended to customers.
So there's not one size fits all. There's definitely different ways and different methods for retrieving different kind of data. So when you go into giving people an understanding of what they have, of clearing out this what they don't know, you've got to discover sources of these data or where data is. What does that mean to me as a business owner?
The first thing as a business owner or as a customer in general, you need to understand your sources of data, and that can be done through a data discovery exercise that can be in a form of an assessment that we can assist you with to understand where your data sits, how many data repositories you have in your environment, and how that data gets stored and how secured it is. And that is a first exercise that most organizations today are kind of struggling with. Before you classify your data, you really need to first discover it and understand the sources. And that is really a big task for most organizations, the journey that they have to take today.
So sources of data, where it's entering the enterprise, or whether we're creating it in the enterprise, or whether we're storing it in a system of record, or it's stored in an unstructured format.
Absolutely. So in terms of understanding where it is coming from is part of the discovery, because you have different channels. As an organization, you can have emails as the primary generator of data. You can have other web contents that will be generating that data. So the first step will be to do that discovery. It can be a very big exercise because it doesn't only cover knowing where it sits, but it covers where it's coming from and what's generating it. I mean, if you are a video editing company, definitely you would have a primary source as where your shots are being taken from. If you are a food production company, how are you storing that data from your processing will be the source of your data, and how you're storing it is a second thing.
So when we're looking at where the data is, do we already then start to look at how do you secure that data, or is that too early in the process?
It's not too early. I think, you have to understand first where your data sits. That's the first exercise. And whether as you're storing it, the current method you're using for storing it, is it a secured method or you need to enhance it? That will be the recommendation if we have to do a data assessment for you. That would be a recommendation that, okay, this is the first step that you need to do, because depending on the maturity of your organization as well, will determine for you whether this data, where it says it is secure, and then how critical it is. Okay. I mean, the criticality of the data will determine how quickly you need to secure it or go through a journey of securing it if it's not critical, and that will be moving to the classification stage.
Okay. So now we're moving into, so if we're storing it, how do we store it and how do we secure it? You just said classification stage. What does that mean now?
So if you have data sitting in your organization, right? So you might have structured data in a form of data that is sitting in a database with tables and fields, and then you can enter a query from a table to figure out where a certain set of data is sitting. So that is structured data. And then you can have video, sound, text that is sitting in a repository, and that becomes unstructured data. So the first exercise of classification will be to figure out which part of your data is structured and which one is unstructured. Maybe the structured part will be an easy one because you'd be sitting with a database like SQL or Oracle.
And there's usually an application on top of that. So there's an application of record. So it's the rest of the noise that we're worried about.
Absolutely. Okay. And that is becoming the biggest growing set of data globally, because there's always tweets, there's always Facebook content, pictures on Instagram. That is, unstructured data, and organizations as well.
Because people make nonsense. They make videos. How many food photos are out there?
Millions of that kind of content. And organizations, if you are using access control, a lot of organizations are doing that today. Entering a gate, you need a footage, you need, the signing, a driver's license, a producing of a driver's license. That becomes content that will ultimately be unstructured.
Okay, and then we change it through taxonomy to make it into structured in some format. So I know I made a food thing, but the food could tell us where the person is or what the person is using or what they're eating or when are they coming in and their habits, and we use that from a marketing perspective or a sales perspective. Once we've got this data and we've now got the taxonomy in place and we can understand it, when does security start to get really onto the front foot? Is it at that stage that we really start to pay attention, or have we walked the whole journey?
I think, the safer way is to walk the whole journey, because, I think that's where defragmentation of data security happens, when you just start somewhere without having walked the whole journey. I think the main thing is to walk the whole journey, understanding your data structures, where areas that you might have omitted, because when threats and attacks come through, they find different loopholes. And if you didn't walk the whole journey, that loophole could be in an area that you omitted.
Okay, all right. And now we know what we've got. We've got our data classified. We've got our in points, our exit points. We've got an understanding of our landscape. How do we go about protecting this data? Are there different levels of security? Is there a one-size-fits-all? Isn't a firewall enough for all of this stuff?
Absolutely not. I think they are.
Absolutely not. You said it so positively. I thought, the firewall is the way to go.
Absolutely not. I repeat it. You have to secure data in different levels. Data, you're talking about a firewall. Firewall is just on a physical server environment where you have a data center with a server farm that you put a firewall for anyone entering through an IP address or any form of network security. Then you use a firewall. But you have inside that server, you have an application. So you need an application level security.
Okay.
You have a database, you need a database level security in a form of a structured data, you need a data security. You have a web, you need web security. So just a firewall is not enough. You need multi-layer security to really be secured.
I love that. Yesterday I was speaking with one of the executives from Micro Focus, and he taught me a mantra. And he says, anticipate, withstand, recover, evolve, as a mantra from a security perspective. And I think that's what you're touching on there. We've got to anticipate where the threats are going to be coming through, and we've got to understand that they are going to be coming. We've got to build it strong so we can withstand. We've got to be able to be in a position to recover the data, and we've got to evolve to meet the threats. Do you think organizations are doing enough to keep the bad people out? And what do you recommend when they do get in? What happens? Talk to me around that.
You're talking about talking to one executive from Macro Focus. I had a chat with a customer because that's what I do on a daily basis. So I was talking them through the whole security, multi-layer protection. And they mentioned one crucial factor that, for them is not important how, they don't want to be put in a position where they are threatened about if they don't do something, they will be hacked or they will be, the environment will be under threat. They are more interested in if we get attacked, because I think they think that it's a bank, and this customer I'm talking about is a bank. That, we know that that's basically the customer telling me that we know that we will be attacked, but what matters is how soon will we recover after an attack. We're not interested on knowing how to prevent an attack. We can do whatever it takes to prevent that attack, but it's how soon can we recover from that attack. I think for me that was quite telling that maybe as service providers, we need to focus on helping customers on how quickly they can recover after an attack instead of focusing on how to prevent them from being attacked.
Do you find people that don't even know they've been attacked and you come in and you say, listen, there's problems in the network here? Do you still find people like that? Are there still people naive to security?
Plenty of people, because I think the threat will only happen if it hits a critical environment, a live environment that a customer will be looking at on a daily basis. But if it's an environment that is not looked at on a daily basis, an attacker could be sitting there for months, just doing whatever they're doing as long as they're not being checked. And then you find a lot of those kind of customers that are sitting, and until there come a point where they need to go into that environment and check something, and they find that massive amount of leaking has happened.
So they're like these parasites living off our businesses, which comes to my next question is this data discovery and classification. So knowing what we've got and really know what you don't know was the topic for this introduction to the series. How frequently do we need to do this data discovery and classification? What do you recommend to your customers?
I think, it can be a once-off exercise depending on the amount of data a customer could be generating.
Okay.
So if it's a data-intensive organization, you might need to do it every 2 years, maybe every year, depending on how much data you generate in a set period. So
the variables are volume of data, but also sources of data, surely, hey?
Absolutely. If you have multiple sources of data, you really need to do that as often as possible, because you might be secured for today, but tomorrow you're generating terabytes and zettabytes of data, and that becomes a threat on its own because you're not managing that data. Because the whole, I think the most important time is data management, which covers discovery, classification, and a whole lot.
Okay. So we're looking at not only the threat management, but the health of the organization. It's almost like this organism, this business is a body we have to look after. And we're looking after external threats that are coming in, but also the health and well-being of that data that's going through the organization. So we've got to keep checking that. And you're saying that if we've done it well the first time, then we can maintain it. But if the data is changing, do it then. Don't get into trouble. All right, I like that. And almost wrapping up this session, what does safeguard the sensitive data mean? We said it earlier. What does safeguarding the data mean to you?
It has to do more with having classified, obviously, starting with discovery. You need to know your data levels or your classification levels, which one is the most important in your organization, and you put maximum security into that kind of data. So, and then the next level, you then put the next level of security. So that's why, we mentioned earlier on that security has to be in different levels, and you can't have same kind of security across all data sets. You need to have a security level for a certain data set, and so that basically covers that term of safeguarding the data. You're securing it by design and by levels of criticality.
Okay, so it's like dealing with onions. If you don't deal with it, it gets very smelly, but it's got layers.
Absolutely.
And we need to deal with the layers. So one size definitely doesn't fit all from your perspective.
Absolutely.
So I understand now we need to know what we don't know in a business. So I want to now move from security, from external focus into Boas as a businessman and your side. How long have you been going?
I think, it's a difficult one, but I'll simply...
How political is this answer? Have you been in business for 2 years or 5 years?
Okay, 5 years.
Excellent. You made it. Oh, and you gave me an answer, 5 years. What's the most surprising thing about running your own business that you didn't anticipate?
Anticipating the changes in the political structure, in the economic structure. I didn't think that a exchange rate of US to a rand can impact my business at any given day.
Wow. That's an interesting...
Yeah. So I thought I'm operating in a localized environment in South Africa. I have nothing to do with the dollar. So I came to know fast that a dollar exchange impacts my business because the pricing I would get from an American-based company basically is controlled by a dollar exchange rate.
Yeah, and we get smacked on that, hey? And that affects your strategy.
All the time.
Do you have a business mentor that you go to and that you can bounce ideas, or are you on your own?
I have plenty of business mentors. I have people that I would always go to, entrepreneurs, CEOs, people that I've worked with, that I always bounce ideas, go back to and say, look, I'm struggling with this. What's your take on this? So I think, I have plenty. I wouldn't say I have a single mentor, but I have plenty of mentors that I have different qualities that would complement my character and the kind of help that I require.
And what's the worst piece of advice you've been given? Which you naturally ignored, which we're glad of.
It's not easy to go into business. You need 2 years. You need a safe fail back. I ignored that.
Okay, so you burnt the boats, dude. You went ahead. BoaTech was going.
Absolutely.
And you got into Micro Focus, and they've looked after you from a channel perspective. That's a really nice thing. It's a good name and a good brand to have behind you. If you had a billboard that was on the N1 for BoaTech, what would you want to tell customers about this security, knowing what you don't know? What would you put on that billboard?
I would say to customers, secure your environment by design. So when you're designing a solution, any product that you bring into the market, have security in mind, secure it by design.
Sensible, wonderful, pedantic way of looking at it. I like that. Predictable outcomes come from planning and deliberately doing it. Thanks, Boas. That's very interesting. That brings us to the end of our first of our 6 series podcasts from Micro Focus and their channels. BoaTech, thank you for being with us, Boas. It's been very interesting. We are going to be seeing you again. I'm looking forward to it. My coffee this morning was of a poor quality because I made it for myself. I'd like to say you never even brought me coffee. I'm heartbroken. I'm going to go off, have a coffee break, and we'll see you again for episode 2.